Welcome to another edition of Driven to Lead. I'm your host, Wayne Brannon. In this program, we explore the real stories from key executives to find the leadership lessons that drove their success, whether in good times or bad. We got a great program for you today, so let's make it happen. Yeah, I'm very happy to tell you that we have John Beering here with us today. John is the CEO of Red Dot Corporation from Puyallup, Washington. John, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. Glad to be part of it.
Yeah, John, you're a transformational C-suite leader that's done a lot of things in your career. You've turned around businesses, you've grown others. Tell us a little bit about your background and your career, and then a little bit about Red Dot.
Sure. Yeah, career-wise, started 33 or so years ago at Carrier Corporation and was part of their manufacturing operations in Indianapolis and spent 5 years, learning about lean manufacturing and early days of that journey for really all the U.S. industry. Moved into product development, then eventually marketing. Was going to business school on the weekends as well during that time. Ended up coming out and actually followed my wife to Connecticut. She took a job with Carrier World Headquarters, and I went to Pratt & Whitney Aircraft Engines in their leadership program, and then spent the next 10 years at Pratt in principally commercial assignments, so sales and marketing, and then marketing. And then from there was recruited to go to Eaton Corporation in Michigan, leading marketing for their then truck group. And then in 08 and 09, when we hit the Great Recession, the world changed a lot, and our world changed a lot. Major restructuring in the company, and I ended up inheriting two former P&Ls to integrate and lead moving forward. And that kind of started my journey as a P&L leader. And I would say, all throughout my career up until that point, there'd been change. I was responsible for leading. And by that stage, that was becoming kind of second nature, leading folks through change. And that was no different, when you all of a sudden find yourself in a situation where the business, the senior leaders shook the snow globe really fiercely to try to get costs out quickly to endure what was, like a 60-70% drop in business. There were a lot of broken pieces to pick up moving forward and culture rebuilding to happen. And so that was actually a pretty fun stage of the career to take some businesses that had legacy, really strong leadership in the market, but had maybe had some declines just because other competitors were nipping at the heels, and to find some ways of rebooting that and then take that forward. That was super gratifying. And then was promoted to my last role at Carrier, leading their global powertrain business or transmission business for the large truck space. And did that for another 3 years or so, and then was recruited out of Eaton. I wasn't sure I was going to ever leave Eaton, but ended up taking the bait to go into private equity, and became COO of large, formerly family-held battery manufacturing company, which was a leader in the deep cycle lead acid battery space, which doesn't sound sexy, but was actually kind of an interesting business.
Right.
In my first foray into private equity, learned a lot of lessons, and I think they learned a lot of lessons, and that didn't last quite as long as any of us were anticipating. And then came out and did some free agency work for a bit of time, spent time with my father at that time, who was dying of Alzheimer's. So it was kind of a silver lining, if you will. And then was recruited to lead a large retailer in the mobility space. So was president of a subsidiary of a company called Braun Ability, which is the largest converter wheelchair accessible vans in the country. The business was called United Access. So we were the second largest retailer of wheelchair accessible vans in the nation, and took 4 or 5 different companies and integrated them, built back-end systems, a new company culture, new front-end systems. And then the pandemic was playing out over that time as well. So as I say, you never let a good crisis go to waste. So that really gave us, I think, jet fuel to very quickly make the kind of changes we need to make to build a business that, really had some fortitude moving forward. And then I got to the stage where I think the parent company didn't really want to grow that retail space any longer. And I really not a maintenance worker and more of a growth guy. And so I, started looking for what was next, and that's what brought me to Red Dot. And so Red Dot is, a middle market firm. We're legacy leader in what I would probably say are high durability HVAC applications for mostly mobile scenarios. We would today view ourselves as a tailored thermal management solutions business, which gives us a little, it's a little tighter definition, but a broader scope in where we might play. So we're, legacy, player in the commercial vehicle space, large trucks, and that's really how the company got its start. But we're, we play in agriculture, mining, construction equipment. For a smaller Pacific Northwest based business, quite global in our footprint and quite global in terms of our customer base and supply base. So that's been a particularly interesting statement to navigate during the tariffs in the last year,
Yeah,
I'd have to
right.
say.
Yeah.
But it's a business we're just celebrating our 60th anniversary, and have really had some good reflection on our roots as a company, and from the founder who really built the business on some pillars around customer centricity, tailored innovation for customers, and then quality. And so my focus coming in has been restoring the culture, restoring the strength of those pillars of the brand, and starting to work on the other opportunities to really turn the business back into a growth business.
So you have a integration of some of your products into OEM applications for large
Mhm.
trucks and
Yeah,
vehicles, commercial, perhaps construction, agricultural equipment,
that's right.
military. And then you also have some aftermarket applications, all custom tailored.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a very interesting business. There's like a lot of the folks I have on this program, there are segments of the industry in general that we typically don't get exposed to. So we don't think about HVAC systems for major commercial vehicles, but it's a different animal than what you'd be doing for passenger cars or other applications, I
It's the
expect.
same, but when you start getting into the specialty systems, it
Yeah,
becomes a little bit more unique. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
And there's
certainly.
until you start diving into it and really thinking about it, there's a lot of specialty vehicles out across the world today, all with specific
Absolutely.
missions, and lots of them
Mhm.
have people in them, or if they don't have people in them,
Yeah,
they need to have cooling for the equipment, and so
sure.
lots of places you need thermal management.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very interesting business. So it sounds like, very early on, you really got yourself on a management and leadership track, and that's really been a part of what you've been doing all along over the years. Now, is that something that you kind of envisioned you would do when you were kind of a young man, or was this just something that you kind of fell into?
It's a good question. I would have said early in my career, like when I was at Carrier, I think my orientation, even though I had been surrounded by a lot of really senior leaders growing up, it wasn't until I was working in an environment where I saw what some of these folks did, and I was like, oh well, maybe I want to be a plant manager when I get older.
Hmm.
And that was kind of the scope of what I could see, and it was really gratifying every day, your efforts out on the floor are bearing fruit, and creating
Sure.
value for our employees and the customers. And I think as I finished my MBA and started looking at what was next, I think I started to really widen my aperture of, well, I really need to rethink what my career path is, because while I was open to moving into more senior roles through manufacturing, as I went to Pratt and Whitney and started doing rotations into other functions,
Mhm.
the reality is like, wow, there's a lot of places you can grow, especially in a larger company. And there's a lot of things you need to have in your toolkit if you really are aspiring to be the senior most leaders on running a total company or big part of a company. You need a lot more exposure points than just
Right.
manufacturing or sales and marketing. You need to hit finance and program management and
Yeah,
other things like that.
sure. Yeah.
So those were
Well,
the
yeah,
assignments I would say that really opened my mind to that.
well, it's kind of an interesting dynamic. A lot of folks I speak with, want to know how you kind of get on that senior C-suite executive track. And of course, being functionally competent in one or more disciplines is a good way to start. But it's interesting that in a lot of places, I mean, yeah, you can do the MBAs and you can do the, executive management programs, and there's good training and development along the way in some places, in some companies. But really, a lot of it you have to put together yourself, I mean, if you think about the skills that you needed to go through that financial crisis in 8 and 9, the skills that you needed to come through the COVID crisis, to be a strategic leader and, realize that you have to bring the team along, and it requires being a servant leader and not just telling them what to do. And all of the things that, I talk with leaders like yourself about, a lot of it has to be self-taught. You have to really pay attention and learn and grow. And it's a journey that isn't necessarily something that's mapped out step one, step two, step three, is it?
No, not at all. And I would say when I coach folks, I would say, advise them that, there's a ratio 70, 20, 10. I always learned,
Mhm.
10% of what you learn is taught, 20% is coached, and 70% is on the job. And
Mhm.
certainly, I would say in the last 10, 15 years, we've seen some very different times in, the business, climate overall. The recession was one, the pandemic was another. I think this year's
Mhm.
brought in yet again another set of dynamics, just, in terms of going from globalization to more nationalism, and how do you
Mhm.
navigate that? And how do you build more
Mhm.
agility in your business so that you can
Right,
flex based on what
right.
your supply chain needs are? And yeah, to your point, there's not a class you learn necessarily those things specifically,
Right.
but I think taking a servant's heart and having open ears and collaborating with your team, and solving each problem one at a time has really been how we've kind of made our way through these things.
Yeah.
And I think really important when I was at United Access and the COVID crisis hit, it particularly hit, the disabled community pretty hard, because
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
hospitals weren't providing support. A
Sure.
lot of the
Right.
peripheral
Right.
support people couldn't do anything. And so the sales in like the worst part of our business probably were down 90% in aggregate, where we were down about 50%. And, some of our competitors or peers, if you want to think of them that way, were laying off 50% of their employees. In a
Mhm.
business like that, where it takes a long time to build expertise on the
Mhm.
products and relationships with the
Yeah.
consumer, we elected to not do that. And everybody took about a 30% hit on pay. And it was myself all the
Mhm.
way down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that way, everybody knew we were in the same boat together, and kind of
Right. Exactly.
almost like
Yeah.
a family. We were going to weather the storm together. And the
Yeah.
number of layoffs was, less than 10%, but the amount of, I think, shared commitment that kind of grew from that shared sacrifice was really powerful coming
Hmm.
out the other end.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. Good lesson. Well, speaking of lessons and leadership lessons specifically, in this program we ask key executives like yourself to tell us a story about, a big win or a major hurdle you had to overcome or something. It could be related to some of the things you've already referenced, but tell us a story. Set it up for us. Let us know what the situation was, what the dynamics were, what
Sure.
happened, and let's see if we can glean a few more leadership lessons out of it.
Sure. Well, I've probably got several different spots where I could share a story. I think maybe I'll focus on, my current role. When I came to Red Dot, um, I found myself the ninth CEO in the history of this 60-year-old company, but I'm the eighth CEO in the last 9 years. And
Wow.
so when you start with that as your backdrop,
Right.
everybody has the same reaction. Oh, oh.
Congrats, you're
And
still there, John.
yeah, right. Well, I think the consequence of the changes, some of these folks were interim, some of them were a little longer lasting, but that constant of change, of leadership, and the consequential changes in culture that were happening, changes in strategy that were happening, the lack of traction around strategy that was happening, some of the other external factors that surfaced during some of those times, really took a toll on the business. And so when I came in, I found, an employee base that was frankly a little skittish. They kind of displayed some of the same trauma you might find in children who've experienced neglect, abuse, and abandonment.
Trauma,
You
yeah.
know, I
Mhm.
yeah, I found, the leaders were quasi-aligned, but not completely aligned, and certainly not rowing in the same direction initially. And so, had to address that. And, early on, my focus was and it became clear to me I had to really focus on culture. So I took the team off site and they spent time getting to know me better, getting to know one another better. And then I facilitated a process personally that took us through, really kind of coming up with what are the norms of behavior we want to have in our business. That is how we all show up for one another every day. It's how we show up for our customers every day, all the other stakeholders, and it will end up becoming a big part of our brand. And it's not surprising that things like focusing on the customers, the first norm in the group, it's solving for yes and taking personal responsibility and caring about quality. And
Mhm.
all of those things that made the brand greater represented, but it's also things that fuel collaboration and employee engagement and building that sense of belonging. Because this is 100% employee owned company. So
Mhm.
so I knew, if I could build a community around engaged employees, I was going to start getting, disproportionate performance, because that's what
Right.
the stats show.
Right.
But my theory was, well, since these folks are all owners, that their give a care factor should be much higher as they really understand the business and the state of the business and the
Sure.
opportunities.
Mhm.
And it has really worked well. I mean, the team is more engaged than ever. We've taken now our second employee survey, and all the scores and on an analytical, objective way are showing that. But you can see it and feel it in the fiber of the business. And so
Right.
we're moving faster. Our plants are performing better. We're still just really early stages of deploying lean manufacturing in these plants. There's a lot of
Mhm.
low-lying fruit. In the
Mhm.
meantime, the employees are really, as owners, taking a much greater care in how they perform. The plants are more productive, the quality is getting better, and the absorption's better. So in this year, we've seen a lot of recession in some of our end markets. The plants are out kicking their coverage, and we're right where we need
Yeah.
to be in terms of
Nice.
EBITDA performance. And that's a function of this cultural transformation. And
Yeah.
so I would say early days of a success that I think is continuing to unfold. But it really all started with, it's about the people. They're the secret
Mhm.
sauce of this business, and they always were. And so we need to
Mhm.
bring it back to that, and then move from there.
Yeah, it's amazing in the conversations that I have with people like yourself. So much of the time, it does come down to culture and it comes down to the people, and it's just because that is the secret sauce. That is the underlying strength that any company has. And managing it well is really what we need to do as leaders. And that means we need to be servant leaders. We need to understand and care for the team. And especially in an ESOP, an employee-owned company, it is even more acute that the employees have, leverage and they have skin in the game. And so they want to make sure that their leader is guiding them in the right direction. So it sounds like the way you establish the cultural norms by engaging them and letting everyone come to those same conclusions, you're going to get to the same result anyway, because everyone's going to realize you put the customer first, and mutual human respect and shared responsibility, and performance with integrity and quality and
Sure.
the kinds of things. We could make a list, and on that, we can make a list of 30 things, and I can guarantee you that 10 or 12 of them would be the core of any company's culture when it's done in a fair and collaborative way. The difficulty sometimes with culture is that, it's just a plaque on the wall in the entryway, but people don't know it and they don't live it. What do you do at Red Dot to make sure it's kind of, I don't mean in your face in a bad way, but always top of mind and present and being lived?
It's a great question. We're doing a few different things. One is, since my first month, I always have a town hall meeting. And in the town hall meeting, we're completely transparent on the status of the business. Where are we
Mhm.
in growth? Where are the numbers? What does that mean? What, in a business like ours, we have an annual valuation with the trustees. So we get one
Mhm.
stock price for the year. And
Right.
so, everybody's, it's a little like waiting for the Academy Award, like, okay, what's going to
Right.
happen? And,
Yeah.
and so we've had, from my first year, we had really nice results on the stock. So I think that helped get some street cred with
Yeah.
everybody that, hey, we're
Mhm.
focused on the right things. But I think
Yeah.
more importantly than that, in the town halls, I spend time talking about culture. Um, each month, every week, we talk about one of the norms, top to bottom, in my staff meeting, all the way down to shop floor meetings. And
Mhm.
we've been through the list now. I think we're on our third lap. And I would say within another year or two, it's going to be to the point where everybody will know all the norms by heart, can name them
Mhm.
off. Like we all wear employee IDs that have an insert with the norms on the back. We have
Mhm.
a kind of a catchy acronym, RISE, stands for Respect, Integrity, Service, and Excellence, that
Mhm.
encompasses all of the norms.
Yeah.
And so that's always in folks purview. And when I'm in meetings and overseeing whether it's an engineering meeting or it's a sales meeting or whatever the purpose is, if there's an opportunity to provide observation and coaching around the culture and highlight the norms. And what's happened over time is, the leadership team's really gotten on board with this, and we've made a few changes where maybe some folks were less on board,
Mhm.
and everybody's in the same direction. So it's not just my voice now, it's amplified through the leadership team. And we have a group of informal leaders in the business that are carrying the torch real time, and they're all empowered to give everybody feedback. Like, we're going to give feedback and be kind to each other, not because we're trying to be overly nice, but because that's what makes us better.
Right.
And we're really striving to be a high performance organization, and what that does is yields value to the company, and then subsequently to the shareholders, which is all of the employees, right? So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So, I had one engineering meeting where I was describing some of the things we were working on. And I said, you can imagine, what would happen if we're able to grow the value of the company by a factor of four. Like, so if you had $1 million or $2 million in your ESOP savings account, in company
Mhm.
shares, well, all of a sudden that becomes some really pretty serious money.
Yeah.
And those are
Yeah.
the kinds of aspirations we have as we're trying to put the
Good.
business back on a growth trajectory.
Good. So I was just curious, one of the, I guess key metrics you can use to see if the people in the organization are really serious about the cultural values and living them is if they call you on it when they perceive that you've been out of bounds. Do you ever get that?
You bet.
Do people say, "Hey,
Yeah.
John, that doesn't fit with the integrity in our values or whatever." I mean, not that you would do something intentionally or inappropriate, but sometimes it's perceived that way, and
Sure.
do they feel comfortable calling the leadership team out?
Yes.
Good.
Yes. And I'm very clear that you can come to me with anything. And I have a few people that are really comfortable doing it. A lot of folks
Overly
that are
comfortable? Overly comfortable.
um say that
No,
but they've
okay.
learned
All
it's
right.
safe. It's a safe space. And
Yeah,
And I
good.
had a recent issue where some people came forward about something, and I just said, "Well, why didn't you come to me sooner?" And they're like,
Sooner,
"I
right?
knew I
Exactly.
should have. I knew it was safe. I'm sorry."
Yeah,
Like these two
yeah,
different leaders were both apologetic,
yeah.
and they took ownership of not having the courage to do it right away,
When
which
they
is
should
the
have.
right
Yeah,
thing to do. It's like, look,
yeah.
we're all on the same team.
Yeah, exactly. Good for you. I mean, that's great leadership, John. I admire that a great deal. So I think it's a good lesson to say that, if you really are used a word in terms of the way you communicate to be very transparent. I find that is really a key factor is, sharing the information broadly in an organization rather than keeping a hierarchical kind of level of clearance, so to speak, to know certain things, delivering the good news and the bad, framing it the right way, making it a challenge that everyone needs to pull together to overcome. I love the way that you're leveraging the culture you've built and then the activation of it all the way through to calling people when
Right.
they get out of bounds. Yeah, good for you.
I
Good for you.
think that transparency, not everybody does it naturally, but it's really important. And earlier in my career, I had some senior leaders said, well, we expect you to be transparent with us. We don't want any surprises. And I said, yeah, I agree. And I'm not going to give you any surprises. But the flip side is I'm committed to being transparent with my team too. So
Yeah,
that doesn't mean I share inappropriately, but they need to
right.
know kind of what's in it for them and how we're
Sure.
generally doing so they can be supportive, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things you don't share, like maybe personnel issues with other people and
Sure,
those kinds of things. There's some appropriate security and privacy issues. But
sure.
I worked in a bigger corporation where there were more rules about what you wanted to share because anything you shared in a big company basically became public when you shared it. So you have to be very, very careful. As a leader,
Especially
I
if you're
always
publicly traded. That's exactly right.
yeah. And so, even if you wanted to share something confidential with with a team of people that you felt would help them, it was difficult to do that. And that always bothered me. I really wanted
Yeah.
folks to know. So I always erred on sharing a little bit more than maybe I
Yeah.
maybe would have been perceived to should have. But it served me well because it let the people know that I trust them and that I'm putting them in a position of empowerment to help with solving issues and taking the business to the
Right.
next level. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great story that you shared. I appreciate you kind of being open and honest about that and talking about your company that way. And I think it's something that all of us can learn from. So to wrap up our conversation today, John, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, as I typically do. So imagine you were a younger man 20 years ago or so when you were just starting out. Is there one piece of advice you'd give yourself that you'd like to have had an impact on your life that you can see now that you maybe couldn't see then?
For sure. I think the number one piece of advice would have been um, trust your gut and speak your truth.
Hmm.
No matter what you fear the political consequences are.
Yeah, amen. I think
And
that's important.
yeah, I had a moment at a past company, a large company, where
Mm.
I learned later there's something called the Aberdeen effect, which is why I did this. It's like you get part of the prisoners and everybody just goes along with it. But I ended up endorsing a path on a program that I knew in my heart was a dumb idea, and
Mm.
it ended up sticking with me as the accountable leader. And
Yeah.
I should have had the courage in front of the three levels of leadership, including the top guy in the company, that that wasn't the way to go. And I think I
Hmm.
had fear in the moment of the political consequences, and it was just stupid. Because to be completely honest, if there was consequences above because of being honest
Yeah,
and trying to do the right thing for the company, then I didn't want to be there anyway. You know,
absolutely.
and
That's yeah.
so I it haunted me until I left, and it haunted me as a lesson learned.
Mhm.
And I will say, ever since that company, I have always been outspoken about what I think,
Good
and
for
I
you.
try to always be appropriate about it. But yeah, I'm not going to leave it on the table, I guess, is the takeaway. And I think that's
Good. Well,
important.
I'd say, you're in good company because I think almost all of us have kind of succumbed to that kind of fear or pressure at some point in our life. And you said it. You need to have courage to always do the right thing. And as you said, it came back to bite you because now you were the leader in charge of this bad idea that got advanced because you didn't fight against it when you should have. And I think we learn that as we get a little bit older. But when you're young and hungry and fearful and you need the job and you don't want to do something to ruffle the feathers and you also don't have the base of certainty and confidence about your point of view always, right? I mean,
Right.
sometimes it might be a moral issue, so it's a little bit easier, even as a young person, but sometimes it's about a business strategy, or maybe it's a judgment call. Or should we sell these products to this customer or not, for example? And I've been in that situation before where we shouldn't have sold the products, but we did, and I should have pushed back on it, and it wasn't the right thing to do, and it kind of got our business sideways. So thanks for sharing that. I think that's really good
Right.
advice. Speak the truth and speak it, with credibility and confidence, and have the courage
Yeah.
to do it. I think that's good
Sure.
advice for all of us.
Yeah.
So let's imagine we're having a beer someday. I don't know if you drink beer, but your name is Beering, so I'm going to say it. Let's say we're having a beer
How
and
could I not? I
or
drink
not, or what?
wine too, but I don't usually say I'm whining.
So Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that wouldn't be a good one either. So we're having a adult beverage and we're talking about our lives and about our legacy and we're telling each other what we're most proud of 20, 30 years from now. What's that going to be for you, John?
I think about every stop I've had in my journey has been really important in my own learning and development. And it was always important to me to leave every place I've been better than I found it. And I know for a fact I have done that. So I think that's one thing I'm proud of, even up
Mhm.
to now.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess as I look back around my life and the other things I do outside of work as well is, I
Right.
want to make sure that my give to get ratio is pretty high
Hmm.
and that, the legacy of lives in positive way is really strong. And
Hmm.
I think, the current role is another good opportunity to do that, especially, for these folks who are employee owners. If I eventually leave here down the road and everybody has been enriched personally as well as in their retirement wealth,
Hmm.
that would be an amazing outcome, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. I think you will do that. You are doing it, I think, and so that seems like a more of a certainty to me after having this conversation with you. So big congrats on that. I think the company's moving in a great direction, and it seems like you're having fun with it as well.
Yeah.
But what you said about touching other people in a positive way and leaving a legacy and creating more value, I mean, in my opinion, our professional lives are really just about creating value. We create value, and then that value comes back to us, sometimes multiplied for ourselves and our families. And that's the way the world's been made. Our reality has this law of reciprocity in it. Give and it shall be given unto you. And I've traveled across 85 countries and worked in a lot of different places. And I used to ask people about that. Do you believe in the law of reciprocity in your culture? Well, what is that? They didn't always know the word in English, right? But I said, well, what goes around comes around. You give and then you receive, or kind of the karmic effect of life. And I mean, almost, 99% of the time, it's kind of an absolute certainty that they know that that's true. They believe it in their lives. They see it in their lives. They operate in that realm in their culture. And so the fact that you want to create value so that value gets returned to you is, I think, a good way to think about the legacy we can leave. And I appreciate that point of view.
Yep.
So, John, thanks for being with us. Thanks for sharing today. If someone who's watching this program, listening to this program, wanted to get in touch with you or your company, how could they do that?
Oh, well, I could certainly connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest thing to do. They could, through there, all my contact information's available. So they can text me or
Great.
email me and all good.
And the company web address,
www.red.corp.com.
red.corp.com. Okay, great. I'll try to get a graphic up on the screen if we can with that so that people can reach out
Okay,
as well.
great.
So, thanks so much again for being with us. I really appreciate
Yeah.
you. And I think this conversation is going to live for a while. A lot of people are going to benefit from it.
All right. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
All the best, John, and God bless. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for being with us. If you like our conversations, please feel free to hit the subscribe and like buttons. And if you'd like to make comments, ask questions, or even explore being a guest on this program, you can reach out to us via email. It's wayne@greatroad.com. That's WAYNE at GR numeral 8 ROAD.com. And until next time, always remember the high road leads to a better place.